Hello and welcome to another An Old Man Watches. And today we're going to be talking about the 1940 drama They Drive by Night, which, as you can see, has quite the cast. And in this film, brothers Joe and Paul Fabrini are independent truck drivers, and they make a pretty meagre living transporting goods. Joe has convinced Paul to start their own small one-truck business, so they're independent, working for themselves and trying to stay one step ahead of their loan shark who wants to repossess their vehicle. Trucking in this area is hard and dangerous business. Drivers are expected to work for exhaustingly long periods at a time, which leads to crashes when they fall asleep at the wheel. Joe and Paul mitigate this danger by switching the driving duties between them, but even this precaution eventually fails them. Just as they've finally paid off their truck, they suffer an accident in which Paul loses an arm. The brothers are forced to look for other ways to support themselves. Joe takes a job driving for their friend Ed, who owns a trucking business. And there, Joe unwittingly becomes a target of lust for Lana, Ed's rather unstable wife. And her schemes to claim Joe for herself will put the brothers in even more danger than driving ever did. So They Drive by Night was Humphrey Bogart's final film as a supporting player. He'd land his breakout role in High Sierra shortly after this and go on to be one of the best-known leading men of his era, and in fact probably of all time. And as it happens, he's not the only actor for whom this was something of a watershed role. But let's get to that in a moment. First of all, let's talk about the film in general. They Drive by Night is a relatively low-key movie. I mean, yes, there is a murder, a fist fight and a couple of car accidents sprinkled into the runtime. But at the end of the day, this is a film about a couple of guys whose entire agenda is to provide for their families, and not really much more than that. Their goals are pretty small scale and personal, but low-key doesn't have to mean dull. The everyday nature of these characters' desires makes them relatable, I think especially at the time of release, when the Great Depression and all the hardship entailed was still a recent memory. And it doesn't hurt, of course, that the cast is very strong. Joe and Paul are likeable characters played by capable actors. Even as Joe's obliviousness to Lana's machinations puts him in danger, and Paul's injuries and financial troubles cause him to resent the sacrifices he has made for his brother, it's still easy to root for them both. Which is perhaps just as well, because I do think that the main murder trial plotline of the film has something of a weak resolution. In the hands of a lesser cast, it would have probably been a bigger weakness for the film, but this cast really does carry it off. And speaking of that cast, there are a couple of really interesting people to discuss here. I've already mentioned Bogart, who these days is by far the best remembered of the four actors whose names you can see on your screen. But at the time this movie came out, he was, as I said, a supporting player. The film's leading man, the Joe to Bogart's Paul, was George Raft. Raft's big break had come in the 1932 film Scarface, which is really good, by the way, where he played the second-in-command to gangster Tony Camonte. Ironically, given the role that launched him to fame and his continued success playing gangsters throughout the 30s, Raft notoriously became reluctant to play morally compromised characters, regularly turning down roles that he was offered because he didn't want to play bad guys. His reluctance to do so actually led to him being suspended multiple times by the studios that held his contracts. On one occasion, he spent 8 months without pay because he wouldn't take the roles that they wanted to give him. He wanted to do something else which wasn't with them. Eventually, they let him do it so that he would come back and do something. Most relevant to our discussion of this movie, however, is that in the years immediately following They Drive by Night, Raft turned down the lead roles in High Sierra, The Maltese Falcon, and All Through the Night. All three movies where he was replaced by Bogart, and all three movies that went on to considerable success. In a very real sense, if you watch They Drive by Night, you are seeing Humphrey Bogart and the man who could have been Humphrey Bogart, but wasn't. And in a very real sense, he is a major contributor to Humphrey Bogart's rise to cinema startup. I mean, the fact that Bogart was a very good actor was, also definitely a factor, but, Raft gave him the opportunity whether he intended to or not. Finally, we've got Ida Lupino. At the time this film came out, the critics identified her performance as femme fatale Lana as the film's greatest strength. She is very, very good in the role, which was her first for Warner Brothers. Before that, she had spent several years with Paramount. And this performance in They Drive By Night won her an ongoing contract with Warner Brothers. Much like George Raft, however, Ms. Lupino was not afraid to turn down roles. She repeatedly rejected roles that she felt were poorly written and, again like Raft, spent a considerable amount of time on suspension because of it. But where Lupino did differ from Raft, however, was that she used her time on suspension very effectively. She spent a lot of time observing the filming and editing processes, which she considered much more interesting work compared to the frequent tedium that she found to be acting. And when her contract with Warner Brothers lapsed, she formed her own independent production company with her then husband. And Ida Lupino would go on to be one of probably the most prominent female filmmaker in 1950s Hollywood. She became the first woman to direct a film noir with 1953's The Hitchhiker, the only woman to direct an episode of the original series The Twilight Zone, and she also directed one of the first Hollywood films to feature rape as to be about a rape, as opposed to just having somebody get sexually assaulted. Today, she is regarded as a pioneer of proto-feminist filmmaking with a career that stretched over nearly 50 years. So that's They Drive By Night, a movie that, is in and of itself a decent little film, but one that is made most interesting by its exceptional cast. Next time, a bit of a change of pace. 1997 indie cult hit Cube, about a group of people stuck in a murderous, ever-changing puzzle box. But that's next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.